week comes from there. But I don't want to talk too much today because I'm super, super excited. We have a very interesting person in the room. And this book, which is To Kill a Democracy, is something I've been reading this week. And I cannot tell you just the roller coaster ride it takes you on. It opens your mind to just so much more and makes you really think hard about your role as a citizen in this country and really what is the job ahead for us. So we have Debasish Roy Chowdhury. He's part author of the book. His partner, John Keane, is in Australia. So Debashish has to carry the weight on his shoulders today because we have a ton of questions. We have lots that we want to understand. Debashish, normally I would just go on about the rules of the game, etc., etc. But I really think there's so much for us to cover ground today. In fact, the questions in the quiz range from water to gender rights to rule of law to just all over the place, all of the pillars, as you would call them, of democracy. But to start with, Debashish, when I picked up this book, the first impression I had was, this is a journalist who writes for the Time magazine and all these high-profile, publications around the world. Clearly, slightly cynical place that you're coming from. Maybe I'm looking at it cynically, but I look at this book as a labor of love, as somebody who's really thinking very hard about what the principles of democracy are and all that is going wrong with democracy. And Debashish, I just want to understand at which point or what made you write this book, or when you started thinking about this book, did you, when you came to the end of the process, did it pivot? Did it change? What was that journey like? And just a very quick introduction to the Game of Fact quizzards that we have, please.
Thank you, Rashmi. And I would like to thank the organizers of India Fact Quiz for having me in this very important event. Me and John, my co-author, are grateful for your interest in our book, To Kill a Democracy, India's Passage to Despotism. And greetings to everybody attending the quiz show today. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your interest. We truly appreciate it. Let me begin by apologizing for John for missing this event. He would love to be here, but because of the flood situation in Sydney, he had to give it a miss. But he sends you all his love. Now, let me briefly introduce myself, John, and the book before we get into the quiz part of this. I'm, as you know, Debashish. I'm a Hong Kong-based Indian journalist, as Rashmi just mentioned. I started out my career in Calcutta. I worked for different newspapers here for about a decade, the Telegraph, the Statesman, the Hindustan Times. And then I left India to explore the world a bit. I've lived and worked in Brazil, in Thailand, in Beijing. And then in 2008, I made Hong Kong my base. And in Hong Kong, I used to work for the South China Morning Post. I worked there for more than a decade. And I quit my job in 2019, right before the election, to start working on the book. This book was released globally last year, and it has been released in India just recently, a couple of months ago. My co-author, John Keane, he's an academic. He's currently a professor of politics at Sydney University. He specializes in democracy, and he's considered one of the most influential political thinkers of our time. It was, in fact, one of his most famous books called The Life and Death of Democracy that brought us together for this project. Now, India Fact Quiz asked me to shed some light on what made me write this book. and how me and John decided to collaborate. Um, it so happened that my interest in democracy as a subject was actually triggered by the democracy movement in Hong Kong. Uh, so what happened was that in Hong Kong, here I was living in a clinically efficient city with terrific civil rights, strong governance, impeccable rule of law, and free press. But it didn't have democracy, it didn't have election, and people craved it. So every other day, there were huge rallies demanding democracy. But Hong Kong had everything that democracy is meant to deliver without actually having elections. And here I was from India, which had supposedly free elections, but people were losing faith in democracy, and there was widespread despair and anger at the political class. This was in 2012, 2013. This was much actually before Modi took power. There were a series of scams in India, news of tremendous political violence coming from my state, West Bengal, and the mood was generally very downbeat on India's quality of democracy. And I was beginning to wonder that if democracy makes the rulers more accountable to the people, why was my adopted city, which is Hong Kong, ruled so well without democracy, and my hometown, which is Calcutta, ruled so badly with democracy? So this contrast is what really got me interested in democracy as a subject and made me think about the book. But I'm a journalist. I tend to procrastinate, so I didn't do much about it. And years went by, and it was after a couple of years, 2, 3 years ago, that my interest in the book was rekindled when things in India again began to look really bad. It was then that I decided to seriously work on the book and realized that I need a democracy expert with me for the project. Why is that? Because I do write a lot about India, follow India very closely, no matter where in the world I am. My day always starts with reading news from home, and all of that is fine. But I do not know much about democracy as a discipline. So I I knew that I needed somebody who understands democracy as a subject. And it was then that I came to know John. He had written a couple of wonderful articles on democracy in the magazine that I was running in Hong Kong at the time. And I also read his book, as I mentioned, and found his writing refreshing. So we got together for the book project, and our goal was to write a book that will be democratic, most importantly, in the sense that it can be understood by everybody and yet have enough intellectual depth to make you think. It's, as you know, it's not often that you have an academic and a journalist coming together to write a book. And a lot of people had warned me and warned him against this adventure, but it turned out to be a very satisfactory adventure, I have to say. So that was how the book was born. Now,
Fascinating. Sorry, sorry, Debashish. Let me allow you to complete.
Let me now go into the book itself a bit, just briefly introduce what the book is about. As you know, there is growing alarm over the quality of democracy in India worldwide. Democracy trackers have all downgraded India because of growing assaults on civil rights and the decay of governing institutions. Now, books on democracy generally deal with the quality of democratic institutions. As you know, it's commonly said that there are these four pillars: the legislature, the judiciary, the executive, which is the government, and the media. we do look at these institutions. And of course, there are some long-running problems with these institutions in India. For example, there is no internal democracy within the political parties. India holds the biggest elections in the world, but no political party in India actually conducts internal elections, which is unheard of in mature democracies. Legislatures are bought and sold like cattle. Bills are barely debated in the House. Large parts of the media are bought and co-opted. The judiciary is horrendously slow and inefficient and favors the rich. If you are poor, you just can't afford the courts in India. So we look at all that, and also the quality of elections, which is at the core of our democracy infrastructure. We describe how money and muscle corrupt elections, and by extension impact the quality of our democracy. So we look at all these institutions of democracy, but the book goes beyond that. What we say is that when we study democracy, we should not just examine the capture and hollowing out of governing institutions, because high-level institutions such as legislatures and the bureaucracies, they rest on and they draw their legitimacy from what we call the social foundations of the people lying down below. And these social foundations are determined by the level of access to the most basic ingredients to dignified life. Dignified life is very important. I won't have time to explain why dignity is important to democracy, but dignified life is very important for self-governance. If you do not have a group of people who care for each other's dignity, you cannot really have democracy. So as part of these social foundations, we look at healthcare, education, labor standards, nutrition, even air and water, in order to determine what kind of a democracy we live in. Uh, we say in the book that unequal access to these most basic ingredients of life is a democracy failure. Now, why do we say that? Because equality of vote in itself means nothing if people do not have a semblance of equality of access to the most basic needs of life. The whole concept of democracy rests on the notion of equality. But if our lives are going to be so radically different in the way we access the basic ingredients of life, it robs equality, it robs our vote of the notion of equality of all meaning and substance. So democracy as a result, it becomes a farce. And and the thing is, the sad reality of our life in India is that when you have in your face inequality of the kind that we have in India, you really have to ask yourself if we can really call ourselves a democracy. You know, me and you can vote once in 5 years to elect our government and consider ourselves equals in a democracy. But if we are not even breathing the same air, or do not have access to the same quality of water, or similar life equalizing opportunities like healthcare or education, you have to ask yourself, are we really equal? And if you're not, is there any sense in treating our votes as equal? And if we can't treat our votes as equal, can we really call ourselves a democracy? So this entire book was an attempt to explore these questions. And these questions have haunted me for a very long time. And I wanted to haunt others as well. So I'm hoping that this book will make you think about democracy in a very different way.
You have been very effective in doing that, I must say. And I'm sure once everyone, and I know a lot of us are impatient to get to the quiz, but each and every question has been very carefully handpicked by Debasish. And we've done some a little bit of embellishing there, but that's about it. It's really 15 very, very thought-provoking facts. And it is a book that I don't think anybody who reads it can be untouched, unmoved, without a thought, without a little bit of anger, without a little bit of sadness. It's very, very hard. It is a very emotional book for something which you would typically be looking at in a non-fiction section. So Dipankar, who's a very dear friend of the Game of Facts, he asks if you could please just cover the controversy around the whole OUP not publishing it in India, and then Macmillan taking up the cause.
Okay, so what happened was that our deal was with, the book contract was given to us by OUP London. And what the deal was that a week after we have a global release of the book from OUP London, OUP India would come out with a cheaper Indian edition, as is normally the practice. But in our case, we suddenly realized, we were told that OUP India was doing a review of the book. So I don't know if you are all familiar with the review process, but what happens in academic publishing is that a book, when you finish the book, writing the book, the manuscript goes to 3 anonymous reviewers. These are domain experts who the publisher chooses. And after they greenlight the book, the publisher then moves forward with the book. So the book has already been through a rigorous review process, and we didn't understand why they need to review the book again in India, and why, if they needed to do that, why they had the manuscript for 10 months and they did not initiate that process earlier. So it was all very confusing, but we thought, okay, fine, we will deal with it. But then months went by and they did nothing about it, and we got worried. And then around this time, we had a month-end talk, and at that talk, we mentioned the fact, people asked when are we going to see the book in India, and we said that we have no idea because we're distraught that the book is not available in India. We can, I am distraught that I can buy the book in Hong Kong, but I did not write this book for Hong Kong. I wrote this book for India and Indians to read. And this is very frustrating for me. And so journalists started asking OUP what's going on with the book. As you know, the atmosphere in the book, the climate in which we live in, leads to all kind of doubts, and people were beginning to think what's going on with the book. And at that point, OUP India told one of the journalists at the Telegraph that that they found the content provocative, and they would not print the book in India. So what they would do is they would import the book and sell the book, obviously at a very high price. It was like 1,200 rupees or something, which completely defeats the purpose of the book, because this book was meant to be mass marketed, because I wanted more people to read the book. And at 1,200, I mean, I wouldn't buy a book for 1,200, 1,500 rupees. So I can't imagine why anybody would. So at that point, it was very clear to us that OUP India, for whatever reason, we don't want to attribute motives, but for whatever reason, they had decided not to pursue the book in India, not to print the book in India. And we asked OUP to give our rights back, the South Asia rights back, and we'll give it to somebody else, which thanks to our editors and our contact people in London who were very supportive all through. They gave us back our rights, and then we approached different publishers, and we chose and Macmillan was from day one very interested in the book, and we were also very interested in Macmillan, so we gave them the rights. And so there, finally, the book was out in the Indian market after, with a new cover. Oh, for those of you who haven't seen the original one, this is the original. This is the global book, and this is the Indian edition.
All right. So with that, thank you, Debasish, for that. I'm so glad you're going to be here. We're going to cover a lot of the topics you just talked about, which really constitute democracy. And with this, I'm going to share my screen now, and we will see the names of all our participants. It's always such a pleasure to see some new names, some old names, and we also have some of our quizzers who asked us some questions for you, which I will post to you as we go along the quiz. So very well, Udit, who's just joined us, he's our unofficial India Fact Quiz book reviewer. So I hope, Udit, you get to review this book. Dipankar, thank you so much for joining us. Dipti, Isha, Ritika, Abhishek, Parneet, I know all of you have been waiting a little bit. Srinita in particular has been really a little edgy about when are we going to start. Very soon, I'm going to start as usual with the poll questions, just so that those of you who are new to the platform get a little comfortable, and then we get into the quiz. Normally, we have just 10 questions, Debashish, but there were so many questions from your book. We just managed to condense this to 15 questions. But, you know, your book, I think, is going to give us enough content for, I think, practically half a year. So with that, I'm going to now start the poll questions, and I'm going to, and then we'll sort of have a bit of a word out, so we'll have some fun, and yeah, get into the quiz. So here we go, the first poll question. And of course, this is a special edition because we have a very special person with us. Debashish, I can't tell you how happy we are that you are here with us today. It's a very special,
honor for
truly
me.
Privilege. So here we have the first question, and this is a multi-select and no right answers. Do you believe India is a democracy? We like to believe we're a democracy, but we're not one, or struggling to be one, or of course, we are the world's largest democracy, or like maybe we were never a democracy. He has a very important question, which I'll ask you at the end. Okay, so I think a bulk of us feel that we're struggling to be one, which is probably a better place to be than we were never one. And then, of course, there's also, of course, we are the world's largest democracy, but then we need to understand, like you were talking about, equal access to public goods, equal access to opportunities, equal access to gender rights or land rights. I mean, all of these are so sort of important in democracy. And 15 of us said we like to believe we're a democracy, but we're not one. I just want to ask, rather Mayur has asked this question. He says, how can democracy be, how can democracy be killed if it's already been killed before? So he's saying something that's already been killed off.
I don't think, Mayur, that democracy has been killed before, unless you're talking about the emergency, which lasted for 21 months. Other than that, I don't think democracy is dead yet. So if you look at the title of the book, it says to kill a democracy. We haven't said that the Indian democracy is dead and it has been killed. There's a lot of life left in our democracy yet. Our people, I see a very healthy disrespect for our leaders still. And I still see a very healthy attitude towards our government, in the sense that people question the judgment of our leaders and our government. And I see a lot of protests. I see people, I mean, in a nutshell, I see a lot of prospect for our democracy still. I wouldn't say the democracy is entirely dead yet. So I don't know how to answer your question on how do you kill something which is already killed, because I don't think it has been killed yet.
Right.
It's not going to be easy to kill Indian democracy.
I'd like to believe so too. All right, so we'll go to the next question. And again, this is multi-select, no points. Do you feel free to criticize your country? it's wrong to criticize your country and government. It's treason. That could be one position. No, I feel scared to say anything critical. Or it could be, we have the freedom of speech. It's in our constitution. So yes. Or I never say anything negative in public. So what would be your position? Okay. So clearly, we do believe that we do believe rather in our constitution, and our constitution says that we do have freedom of expression, belief, faith, worship. So clearly, freedom of speech is very dear to us. So yes, we can say what we want, but still there is a decent number of us who feel like, no, we need to be worried if we say something critical. Debashish, you've been there. You have seen the unleashing of trolls on you, and it can be quite brutal. So being scared, I think, is a very valid point. You don't want to go through that trauma. It is very hard, especially when they sort of, come on you. And then, 70 of us have said, I never say anything in public, which is then the position that you take, because you really don't want to, compromise your family, your friends, your career, possibly. There's so much at stake that you worry about these things. And 6 of us feel it is wrong to criticize our country. I like to believe it's an act of love. When you criticize something, you only want the best. And therefore you will say something that's wrong, or it hurts you or affects you. But at this point, Debashish, I want to ask you a question that Gaurav has asked. It's his question. He says, is weak democracy better than strong authoritarian government?
Actually, Gaurav, at some point when a democracy continues to degrade, weak democracies and authoritarianism, they begin to mirror each other. There isn't really much difference, which is what our book tries to show, is how you degrade your democracy to the point that you begin to transform into a despotism. And there's a beautiful line, I think it's my favorite line in the book, and the line came from John. He says how the butterfly of democracy transforms into the caterpillar of despotism, and this is a process, and at that point there is really no difference between a democracy and an authoritarian leadership.
All right. With that, we go to the last poll question. One thing that makes you feel proud to be Indian. We've come a long way, clearly. And while there's so much that's wrong, there is also a lot that's very good. And we're trying to ask you to think about what's that thing that you hold very dear to you. And as always, all of you just make such a beautiful word cloud for us. So let's see what magic you put out there.
You can't say cricket team.
Okay. So one thing that's, all views are really good. So we go from ancient civilization or resistance to power, to food, to unity and diversity. That clearly something that's very important to us. A liberal constitution, Ram Rajya, women power, well, we still have to see that, but it's emerging with women coming out to vote more, culture, diversity, IFQ, thank you, freedom, culture, food, values of democracy. Thank you. It's a rich environment, good heart. Okay, all right.
I also see kuch nahi.
Kuch nahi, yes. And that's also, so there's, and this topic and this very word, Debashish, democracy, you swing through so many emotions. At some point, at times as a citizen, you feel enraged, you feel deep affection, you feel absolute disgust, you feel completely indifferent. And I think more than ever before, we're feeling these emotions, so it's kind of been quite a roller coaster ride, and I think that is a very important part, right, of the evolution of citizens and thinking
Exactly.
of what it is.
Exactly, because democracy is also the idea that things can change, that democracy is anti-status quo, that things need not be the same as they are now. So, and democracy is always a work in progress. So, it can always get better. Even in the world's best democracies, it can always be improved.
Fantastic. Okay, so with this, we come to the end of the poll section. Now we will be getting into the actual quiz. It's 15 questions. And the source for today's quiz is Debasish and John Keane's To Kill a Democracy, India's Passage to Despotism. And at the end of this quiz, not 3, but actually 5 winners, which is the top 5 winners, are going to walk away with a signed copy. It's the author that we have immediate access to. So I think Debashish, it's going to be you that we'll be bothering, but 5 of you are going to get an author signed copy of this very, very special book. So now we head into the quiz, and we have the first question coming up, double points for this one. Percentage of current members of parliament with criminal cases against them. Is it 43%, 23%, 33%, or 63%? So quite a few of us actually got this right. It's 43%. And Debashish, when you were writing this whole chapter and you're looking at 43%, and sort of, again, this is all sort of self-declaration, because when you are filing as a candidate during elections, you have to put down the list of criminal cases against you. So what was that, did you get any interesting insight? Has there been an increased, well, clearly that's what the data said.
I was actually a bit surprised by the data because I thought that it's a bit low. In fact, bear in mind that these data are based on the cases of which the court has taken cognizance. So, there has been some movement on the case. These are not based on frivolous cases which people file against one another. So these are serious, more or less serious cases. And I was surprised that it's only 43% and not more, given the kind of politicians that we have. And the book, I have always wondered what is it that draws politicians, draws criminals to politics, and how does it really work? I've never really understood the system. So this book explores why criminality has become part and parcel of Indian democracy, why we have so many gundas in politics, when did it start, what draws them to politics, what makes them successful, and what does it say about our political system. And of course, you know that there is a lot of political violence in many parts of India, but I have to tell you that there are all kinds of violence. Not all violence is perceptible. There is physical violence, but there is also disguised intimidation without actual violence. So this book also explores the many different ways in which violence works and the role that criminals play in that violence and in elections in general.
All right, so we're going to take a look now at the scoreboard, and this essentially is 5 top scorers. It's the first question, they got it right, and well, Mamta was very quick to answer that, followed by Mayur, Kartikeya, Rohit, and Udit. But this is a very dynamic scoreboard, so wishing all of you luck in trying to keep your position. All right, the next question coming up. Percentage of current members of parliament who are crorpatis. Is it 93%, 63%, 83%, or 73%? All right. So it is 83%, and 27 of us have got it right. Debashish, in your book, you make a special mention of this 43% of criminals who are in politics. And then out of those, the ones that really are, have more money. So there is a connection also between criminal cases and money and power. Seems to be some sort of triangle.
Yeah, I mean, we are all aware of how politics has become an avenue to mint money and the immense corruption that goes hand in hand with politics. But there is a relatively less understanding of why and how money drives politics. So we draw on statistical evidence to show how money increases the chances of winning an election. Now, why is that a problem for democracy? It's a problem because people's representatives are supposed to work for the people. Now, when they fight elections with their own money, they don't have to. They don't have to represent anybody. They will naturally, when in office, they will tend to recoup their investment. So you will have corruption. Uh, Also, when you fight elections with money from special interest groups, people's representatives, again, they don't need to work for the people. They're answerable only to their contributors. They're uh, big fat contributors. So that means that politics is hijacked, and your representatives don't really represent you anymore. So dark money in general has a deeply undemocratic impact on politics, and with our, as you know, with our electoral bonds, we have basically opened the floodgates of dark money in Indian politics. It was always a problem, but now it has scaled to astronomical levels.
Absolutely. Thanks for that. And we'll just take a look at the scoreboard now. It's been a bit of a change there. It's Akhil now in the lead, followed by Udit, Mamta, Sri Ranjani, and Aswani. The next question now, and double points for this one. Percentage of Indians using personal connections to access public services, which essentially means bribes or accessing powerful people, is it 46%, 26%, 16%, or 76%? All right. So there is one optimist in the room who went for the lowest number. 76, I think, 76% was selected by 19 of us. But the bulk of us at 46%, because we know it is fairly, I would say, balanced. Half of us have to get our work done through bribes. But Debashish, when you are looking at this data again, do you feel that there's, what were you finding as you actually went about writing about this data point, and really how, paying bribes, leveraging personal connections are sort of normalized?
Having been brought up in India and lived in India for a very long time, I of course know that corruption is part of our life. So the data itself was not that important to me because I knew that it would be a high percentage. But what I was trying to explore was what that means for democracy, how it's related to our democracy. And of course, this is about corruption, and corruption is one of democracy's biggest enemies because public services are a right, and they're there to equalize our life opportunities and create a semblance of equality in our quality of life. Now, when you have to bribe your way to public services, you tilt the balance in favor of the people who can pay more, which is naturally deeply undemocratic. So that is the connection that I was trying to find, and I was trying to understand the dynamics of this, let's say, unfreedom that is inherent in a corrupt system.
Thank you. The scoreboard. Okay, so Udit's in the lead, followed by Akhil, Sri Ranjani, Pradyumna, and Vishnu. Right, on to the next question. This is true or false, and you get double point for this one. An average Mumbaikar wastes 11 days in a year stuck in traffic. 11 days in a year stuck in traffic. Is this statement true or false? Okay, so I think the answer lies in the statement itself. And it's sad, but it's also, if most of us got it right, I think probably we have taken, I mean, we accept that that is a way, cities have got to function. You want to be in, a megapolis, you want to be in a big city, you have to live with this. Debashish, you've written, I thought this was one of those chapters where I actually took away so much from, because you've written what the role of cities is meant to be for people, for society, for a country, for democracy in itself. So when you actually were looking at this particular data point, what were you thinking? And, in a sense, the irony of living in Bombay always is that, a person who's driving a top end luxurious SUV and a person who's in a rickshaw kind of feel equal just when they're on those roads stuck in that miserable traffic, for that time. That's the only space where we feel a connection to one another. But what was your thought process when you were writing this particular chapter? And how have we taken it for granted that this is okay?
So this data comes up in our, as you know, in our chapter on physical mobility. And this is personally my favorite chapter in the whole book, because I have rarely seen democracy being linked to the ease of physical mobility, even though the ease of motion has historically been central to democratic evolution. Public transport, for example, revolutionized democracy because it opens up new opportunities, it levels the playing field. Say, for example, its impact on women. Access to safe and efficient public transport helps women to pursue educational and professional opportunities. But the Indian reality is such that women often drop out of school or college, or are geographically constrained from pursuing their professions. Say, or for example, if a potential workplace is too far away from home, an Indian woman might not opt to take that job. So lack of safe public transport has deeply undemocratic effect of favoring men or people with personal means of transport. So, and the more personal means of transport you have, or the more situations you will have in which you will end up spending like 11 days of your life every year sitting in a car at a traffic signal. In fact, our book has data which I've forgotten now exactly. In Mumbai, in particular, how the number of buses have gone down over the years, and how the number of cars and two-wheelers have increased over the years, and and this is this is all reflected in the huge traffic jams that you see in Mumbai now, and any city which does not have uh, proper public transport is a deeply undemocratic city. So it is our transport dysfunction is a reflection of our democratic dysfunction, which is normally not discussed a lot when we talk about our democracy.
Fascinating. All right, so we'll take a look at the scoreboard. It's Akhil, Shiranjani, Rohit, Navneet, and Samyak. And we'll get into the next question. This one is for double points. Percentage of sexual violence cases that are not reported in India. Is it 59%, 29%, 79%, or 99%? Okay, so it was split between the two highest numbers. And actually, we pretty much got this one right because 25 of us said 99%, and that is the correct answer. No surprises there, Debashish, when you were writing this in the book? And did you get a sense of, really what are those reasons? Intimidation, the whole broken system, what was it that you felt were the top reasons why people don't even report sexual violence in India?
Actually, it's not just sexual violence, but all manner of crime is hugely underreported in India. It's because the system has been created in a way that discourages police from registering cases. The more crime they register, the worse it looks for them. So there is an incentive for cops not to register cases in the first place, which is why filing an FIR can sometimes be a struggle. So these problems are compounded in cases of sexual violence, which families tend not to report at all for social reasons. And it doesn't help that you don't see a lot of women in Indian police stations. It is changing, of course, but it's still a huge problem. I think, or we mentioned in the book that women comprise just 7% of India's police personnel, and less than 1% of supervisory positions. So police stations are still very women unfriendly and not exactly a place where a woman traumatized by sexual violence would want to go.
All right, we'll go to the scoreboard now, and it's a bit of an upset there. We have Navneet now in the lead, followed by Aswani, Samyak, Niharika, and Ayush. And we'll get into the next question. According to the latest UN World Happiness Report, out of 153 countries, India's ranking is 144, 44, 14, or 84. Clearly, the lesser the number, the more happy we are. The higher the number, or the larger the number, the more unhappy we are. I think our quizzers really have a pulse on the mood of the nation. So with that, I'll quickly go to the scoreboard and we'll get to the next question. It's Navneet, Aswani, Niharika, Samyak, and Anuj. And let's see what the next question has for us. Percentage of families living in Delhi who do not worry when a female family member is out at any time of the day is 1%, 61%, 41%, or 21%. This is who do not worry when a female family member is out and about doing their thing in Delhi city. And the family members don't really have to worry about that person. Could be a wife, daughter, grandmom. Right. So yes, this is another one which really tells us the state of things. This is the capital of the country, and 99% of families are worried. Debashish, did it surprise you? Did you feel something terrible here?
It did and it didn't, because Delhi has always had a reputation like that. But I would really ask all of you here to look at the World Happiness Report. The next one is, I think, coming out on the 18th of this month. It tells you amazing things about your own country, and most importantly, in numbers. This report is not often cited in analyzing democracies, but it should be. And it tells us a lot about our quality of life and, by extension, the quality of our democracy. This number, for example, this number on women's safety, tells how free women actually feel in India. Now, why is this important for democracy? Because democracy is about freedom, right? And but the thing is that like one of the first things I noticed when I was living in Beijing was how free women's movements are in China at all times of the day and night. There's just simply no fear. You will see women returning from parties, totally drunk in a group at 2 in the morning, and there's just no fear like we have in India, and it made me wonder, and whether these women who do not get to vote, and so in our understanding are not in a democracy, are they in some way freer than women in Delhi who get to vote regularly but have to be perpetually mindful of what time they can step out, or what to wear, and so who is actually freer? So I have thought about it a lot, and I I I think you should also think about it a bit, and this will give you a different kind of perception about democracy.
Absolutely. Quick look at the scoreboard. Aswani, Anuj, Ayush, Samyak, and Gaurav now in the lead. But we still have a number of questions left. This one is for double points. On average, Indians bear X% of medical expenses from their personal funds. So there's no insurance or anything to pay this. Is it 7% of medical expenses, 67%, 37%, or 17%? Right. So a bulk of us actually went for the right answer, which is the highest number. It's 67%. Debashish, again here, health being one of those very important, or healthcare rather, being one of those very important services or public goods as we call them. When you were writing this chapter, did you see a big difference between the other countries neighboring countries possibly in terms of the out-of-pocket expenses towards medical and healthcare?
Oh yes, I mean statistically, I mean where I live in Hong Kong, um, you won't have to pay anything for the most decent of healthcare. Of course, there is private healthcare too if you want extra care. But I mean, what we have in India is a criminal system. So as I was saying earlier, that uneven access to elementary healthcare is one of our democracy's biggest flaws, and this particular piece of data tells you that in a number. What happens is when you have a state with a system in which you have to buy better healthcare, the state basically treats our bodies as unequal while it treats our votes as equal. Now, that to me makes no sense, right? And a situation like that makes democracy a farce to me. There are actually other numbers related to this. There are very shocking numbers, and I will tell you a bit about this. What this high personal expenditure does uh, is that it forces millions of people into poverty every year. In 2011, and I'm stating Lancet figures here, in 2011, 39 million people were pushed into poverty in just 1 year in order to pay for healthcare. You go to villages, you will find people who have sold their land holdings in order to afford healthcare for their family. That was in 2011, 39 million. By 2017, this figure had risen to 55 million. In that 1 year, 55 million people had been pushed into poverty. And I don't know what the situation is after. We don't have the post-COVID figures here. So you can imagine how tremendously harmful is an understatement for a situation like this, um, is for democracy and for the country's progress in general. I mean, we always keep hearing about the millions of people who have been pulled out of poverty, but this just one healthcare, this just one aspect of public life pushes millions of people back into poverty and into despair and into distress, and which, if at some point we do not address this politically, and sadly this is never a political issue, if we do not address this, I don't know what hope we have for our democracy.
True. A quick look at the scoreboard. It's Anuj, Ayush, Niharika, Aswani, and Nishan. I know Aswani has her exam, so we'll probably try and speed up a little bit here. But on to the next question, and double points for this one. WHO recommends one government doctor for every 1,000 people. India has one doctor for every X number of people. Is it 11,000, 3,000, 6,000, or 1,500? One doctor for every 1,000 people is the WHO standard. We want to know what that number is in India. Okay, we'll keep that there. One doctor for every 11,000 people. Clearly, this is one indicator that's not working very well because, like you said in the book, Debashish, there is a concentration of doctors in urban areas where the prospects of earning are higher. And in the rural areas, there is a huge deficit. And then when it comes to the care specialist, it gets even worse. I think that's, again, a very interesting chapter in the book. I'll just very quickly go to the scoreboard, and Debashish, we're going to come back to this topic in a bit. But in the lead is now Niharika, Nishant, Prem, Navneet, and Swati. And I'll go to the next question. This is a true or false, and you get double points for this one. Less than 20% of the food that India produces every year is wasted. less than 20%. Is this statement true or false? So clearly we know something here. And again, Debashish, a very fascinating chapter where if you can just elaborate, one of the data points that hit was the fact that the amount of food that India wastes could actually feed Bihar, which is the most impoverished state, for an entire year.
Everybody in Bihar, you could feed for a year for by the amount of food we waste. I think all of you guys should try and make a trip to government warehouse. You will be shocked by the size of the rats. In fact, I don't know if the law has changed. I have to check. But when I was a journalist in India, I remember there was a court verdict in which the judge actually ruled that a certain amount of rat shit is permissible in your food. And this situation has been made possible because year after year, governments, both state governments and federal governments, they promise better storage systems for our food. But in a country where hunger is so rampant, we criminally continue to waste food just because we don't know how to store them properly. And if you pick up the book again, I would seriously ask you to especially pay attention to this chapter on hunger, which is called Million Famines. This is a problem which we don't talk about a lot in India, but we are one of the hungriest countries in the world. And we should really worry about this, and we should really do something about the way we waste food.
Right. So I'll take a look at the scoreboard. It's Nishant, Prem, Niharika, Navneet, and Swati. And we'll go to the next question. Percentage of India's rural households that are landless. Is it 56%, 16%, 36%, or 76%? Right, so it's 56% of rural households that are landless. Debashish, when you've analyzed this data point, you also throw up the caste lines, you throw up the gender as well, and you also make note of the fact that the upper castes typically are the ones who hold more land, while Dalits and Adivasis in general do not hold as much. So again, that was sort of some very fascinating points that you raised just on this subject. I'll very quickly go to the scoreboard just to speed things up a little bit. But we have Navneet now in the lead, followed by Nishant, Prem, Niharika, and Swati. I think it's a bit jumpy, the scoreboard this time. The next one, true or false, and double points for this. 80% of India's surface water is polluted or unusable. Is the statement true or false? Right. So 45 of us got it right, and it is true. Again, here we have an issue with groundwater, and we have an issue with surface water, and we have an issue with not being able to harvest rainwater. So seems like we're in a very difficult position. I'll quickly go to the scoreboard. Well, nothing much has really changed, but we can see Prem Chabra on the scoreboard along with Mukesh Chabra. So yeah, that's going pretty well for the Chabra family. All right. The next question, double points for this one. Among the 20 most polluted cities in the world measured by PM 2.5 levels, X number of cities are in India. Is it 8 out of 20, 14, 18, or 4? Right. Interestingly, Debashish, most of these 14 cities are in the Indo-Gangetic belt. There's a special concentration there. And this whole aspect of thinking of air as right to live, or really as something which is very basic. It's something that is entitled to us. Clearly is something, and I, you know, what I was fascinated by in the book when you write about Obama's visit to India, and then how, you know, the US embassy was sort of, you know, went around putting up all the air purifiers. Clearly, I think that was sort of a bit of an eye opener and a bit of a shock to the system, because you know it's bad, but you don't realize just how bad it really is. That I thought was a very interesting anecdote that you added in the book. I'll just take a look at the scoreboard, and it's Navneet, Nishant, Prem, Niharika, and Rohit just, you know, came up into the scoreboard. Good for you. But let's see how it works right till the end. Okay, another true or false, and double points for this one. 10% Indians enjoy air quality that meets the WHO standards. Is this statement true or false? Okay, so we know that there's a lot of inequality in the country. And one would have thought 10% Indians enjoying air quality, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I'm sure there is this creamy layer of 10% that probably enjoy this air quality, but the number is something else, right, Debashish?
Yeah, 1%, right?
So actually, it is not 10%, it is 1%. So maybe truly, if there is one thing that is unifying all of us, and which is actually the only democratizing factor, it probably is the fact that we all are breathing the same polluted air, which probably, I hope, is some incentive where, you know, the elite will probably take the lead in making sure that we really have some standards, or we take some corrective measures in ensuring better air quality.
You know,
All
the
right.
problem with India is, if I may jump in for a minute, is that in India, because all the media houses are in Delhi, all you see in the media is about Delhi's pollution around October, November, when they start burning the stubs. It's like the rest of the India, like the rest of the country, there is no problem at all. But there is only one city in India which actually has decent air, according to these WHO standards of 2.5. Just one city, which is, I think, Mizoram. In all other cities, the air is not worth breathing. That's where we are.
Onto the scoreboard, Nishant, Kartikeya, Rohit, Navneet, and Pradyumna. And we'll very quickly go into the next question. UN recommends 222 police personnel for 100,000 people. India's average is 151 police for every 100,000 people. We're asking, how many personnel do we have in Bihar for 100,000 population? Is it 75 police, 125 per 100,000, 145 per 100,000, or 105 per 100,000? Right, okay. So it's clearly 75, which is absolutely dismally low. And really that's a very skewed number, where again, the police system is, we already know, is compromised for various reasons, and then they're completely outnumbered and are unable to provide services that they're meant to. So that's again another very interesting point, and you've written quite a bit about that too in your book. I'll move on to the scoreboard now. We've come to the end. I'm sorry. That was very quick. It moves so fast. But Debashish, here we have it, the podium. It's Pradunma, who was our first IFQ winner in the third position. Navneet in the second position, Nishant, and our two runner-ups who aren't really appearing on screen, but you know who you are. You all five will be getting To Kill a Democracy, and it'll be a signed copy. That actually went faster than I thought. I'm so sorry.
Congratulations, all of you.
Debashish, it's been a bit of a depressing, very, in your face kind of a session. Please leave us with some positive and optimistic notes, please.
Well, the fact that you are depressed with it and not reconciled to it is a source of hope, right? That you are depressed, you are unhappy about it, means that you want it to change and you believe that it can change. So I guess that's the spirit we have to, we already have that spirit in us. It's very intrinsic to us. Our democratic instincts are very sharp. So no matter how hard any government tries to turn us into China, it will never happen, because we push back, we resist, we demand change, and we will keep demanding an improvement in our lives. And I hope that this book will make you seriously think, reflect on what we should be demanding, and look at the structural causes of the problems that we have, on why, for example, we never talk about air in elections. Why is never school education never a political issue? And it should come from us. It's not up to the leaders to make this an issue unless we, the people, make it an issue. And I hope that this book will make you think in that direction and make you realize how important all this is for democracy. That it's not just democracy. The bottom line is not just about elections. It's a way of life. And so,
thank you.
And we need
Thank
to
you
improve
very
our
much.
lives.
Thank you very much. That's a very nice note to end this week's Game of Facts. We missed the Hindi quiz for good reason, but we'll be back next Saturday at 5 p.m. We'll start off first with the Hindi quiz to make up for this, and then we'll get into the English quiz. So thank you all so much for joining, and thank you, Debashish, for sharing this time with us and this wonderful book with us. And we hope to stay in touch, and thank you all very, very much.